Hi, I'm Larry, and welcome to my studio. Before we get started, I just want to give you a little background on myself and why I decided to do these videos. I've been a teacher with the City of Torrance Cultural Arts Adult School program for about the last 15 years. And over the course of that time, I've had a lot of students come to me. And when this coronavirus broke out and classes were closed, my students were emailing me saying, "What are we going to do? We need something to do." And I had been wanting to figure out how to do videos for them for some time. And I thought, I don't have anything but time right now, so I was going to figure it out. So that's why we have these videos. So if you're a first-time student here, I hope to see you again, and I hope you also enjoy this video. Today's project will be an acrylic project, but I first want to show you my setup so that you know what I'm using and how I do things. So I'll be back in just a second. Thank you. Here I have my acrylic palette. This is a stay wet system, but what I've done for myself is that I've put in this is a cutting mat that I got from like a dollar store or something like that, and cut it to fit. And then I have placed my paints out on wet paper towels. That keeps the paints good for weeks on end if you treat them right. The gray is just a color I mixed up. I'll explain that later. But I like the stay wet system because if you, like I said, treat your paints right, they will stay good forever. The way they cure is either by air or by heat, so you want to make sure that you keep them covered up when you're not using them, and not to leave them in your hot car, especially in the summertime. And this is like a big Tupperware box. It seals completely and the paints will be good. That gray color was something I mixed up 6 weeks ago, and it's still good. That's why it's on my palette. Here I have my brushes. I have a series of, these are flat bristle brushes in all sizes. I do have some synthetic sables. I use mostly the bristle brushes because we do an awful lot of scrubbing with them. For example, this brush and this brush, if you can see them, started out the same. So this one has been used and scrubbed. This is a new brush. Will eventually look like that. So that's why they're usually inexpensive, and don't worry about them because they will eventually wear out. I have tubed paints. I use the heavy-bodied paints when I can find them. I also have some regular consistency paints. I don't recommend some of the student grade quality paints for this technique because they just don't have enough pigment in them. If you'd like to find a list of my paints and the equipment that I'm using, you can go to my Blogspot page. I'll put that information probably down at the bottom of here someplace, and I'll have it at the end of this video as well. I also have, this is a soft blending brush. I use this when I'm doing big areas or doing something I want to blend like a sky. These are very, very soft. They're like a blush brush for the ladies out there that know what I'm talking about. Very soft. If it's stiff and hard like these bristle brushes, that's not a blending brush. So make sure you get a nice soft one. Also, I have This is a heavy, thick gesso. I use gesso instead of white. And when I say thick, it's very, very thick. I don't know if you can see that. But your gesso should not be able to do that. This is very, very heavy. Like I said, it's easier to make it thinner than it is to make it thicker. So I like the heavy gesso. Gesso is a more opaque medium than like titanium white, and if you need to give a little more body to your paint, adding just a touch of gesso will give it a little bit more body. Acrylics tend to be on the transparent side. I also have my water. This is just an old coffee can, and inside of here you can see that there's a screen. I just cut some screen and put it in there so that when I'm rinsing my brush, I can run it against that screen and knock off more of the paint. So that's all that is. A spray bottle. You want to have a spray bottle with you to spray your paints and to spray your canvas at times. Here's my easel setup. I have my easel behind here, and all this is a 16 by 20 canvas panel that I've used before, and I painted out with some gesso and a little bit of phthalo blue and burnt sienna to make this gray color. And to that I've attached a piece of molding I found in the garage and some gator clips on either side over here. And that way, when I'm working on a smaller canvas, and this is a 9 by 12 canvas panel, and a lot of times if you're setting them down in the easel tray here, you can lose quite a bit of the bottom part, and then you need something to hold it while you're painting down almost a ½ an inch. So that's why I've done this, and it works out really well. So let me get set up here and I will go over how to start this painting. When I'm working on my acrylics, and for oil painters you may do this a different way, but with acrylics they tend to dry faster, and if you are using your paintbrush to put your design on with the acrylics, you can leave little ridges of paint, and those little ridges of paint won't come off unless you get them right away, or if they're dry you have to sand them down. And the ridges of paint, if you don't get them sanded down or flat, will act like ruts in a road. They just seem to get worse and worse, and everybody will see it and you're not going to be happy. So what I use instead, you can use, these are charcoal pencils and a white pastel pencil. This is when I'm using a darker canvas. These are charcoal pencils. Hopefully they're soft. You can use this is just a pastel, one of my pastel chalks. But most of the time I use this. This is called a soft vine charcoal. And what I like about it is that you can do your drawing on there and oops, maybe you've made a mistake. You can come back in and just wipe it right off. It doesn't hurt the paint. It blends right into the paint, and it just makes your life a little bit easier. So soft vine charcoal. Now to get started with this, first I guess I should show you what we're going to be painting today. I usually use my own photographs. So this is a photograph I took. This is Point Vicente lighthouse out here on Palos Verdes Peninsula, and that's Catalina Island behind it. This is a fairly simple painting, but the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do the background. We aren't going to do any drawing at all right now other than the horizon line. With acrylics, you want to work from what's furthest away first, and then work your way forward. I will have a drawing. This is a drawing that I'll have on my blog page, or a link to it from my blog page, so you have a drawing. I did this freehand, so it's not too bad. I will probably freehand this when I get to that point. But to start out, I'm just going to put a mark at about 3.5 inch line on my canvas here. And just try to make your horizons as straight as possible. Nothing annoys me more than to see a crooked horizon, especially when it's a lake or an ocean. Just double check that. When I'm standing off to the side like I'm doing right now, things are a little bit distorted, so I wanted to just check that and make sure that it was straight all across. So that's the drawing we're going to do for right now. I want to get started. I'm going to take my picture. I've got a little gator clip right above. You always want to keep your reference material right where you can see it. You don't pull it out. It doesn't do you any good if it's in your bag or sitting on your kitchen counter or the dog's chewed it up or something. So have it there and ready to go. My eyes go back and forth to that quite often. Okay, I have my spray bottle here. I want to lightly mist the canvas so that the gesso I'm going to put on goes on a little easier. Always wet a dry brush first. And so I've just put water on my brush, and now I'm just lightly drying it off. The natural bristles are like sponges, and if the first water they see is in your paint, they're going to absorb that paint, and you're not going to keep your brushes for very long. So do that, and it will help. It's not a cure-all, but it will help. Okay, so I'm picking up some gesso off of my palette, and I just want to scrub it onto my canvas here. Just want to get a good coverage. This gesso is going to help my paint blend, and it's also going to make it lighter, which is something I want. If you remember, the sky in this is pretty light. I'm going to just kind of go over that line. I don't care. I can always put that line back. So just want to come in. Just make sure my canvas is covered. Now I'm going to pick up a little bit of ultramarine blue and a very tiny bit of burnt sienna. And I'm going to come across the sky here. Now you can see how that gesso has made that blue a lot lighter. That little bit of burnt sienna, which is a bit stronger than the ultramarine blue, it turns it a little bit gray. Pick up a little bit more blue, little touch of burnt sienna. And I'm just kind of pulling this color down, but I want to come in and just, now these are long kind of crisscross strokes, so I'm just lightly going over it and pulling that color down. As I go down my canvas, it gets lighter and lighter. The sky is always darker at the top and lighter at the bottom. This is going to have some clouds in it. Now I can leave it like this, has kind of a painterly look to it, and all that means is that you can see brush strokes and brush marks. Or I can take my blending brush here that I have and lightly go over it. Now this blending brush is dry, so I have to be careful not to hit this too hard. Just lightly go over it and just blend that sky. Again, big, long X-type strokes. When I'm done with a brush, I will wet it and then I'll set it down in my palette so that it'll stay moist until I can rinse it out and clean it up. If you don't do that, the paint will dry and you'll have some problems. Right, so I'm going to repeat the process down here for the water, and that's going to be, I can spray a little bit of water down here. Take my gesso. Now you don't have to use gesso if you want a darker color. You can just use the paint. Again, I'm going to pick up the ultramarine blue, and this time I'm going to pick up a little bit of Hooker's green on there. So I've got Hooker's green and ultramarine blue. Just going to streak that on. Maybe a little more green. Even though in the picture it looks kind of lavender, I'm gonna make it green. Just go real gently across where the horizon is. And yes, I know that right down where I'm working right now that there are plants and cliffs and everything like that. But this way I know for sure that I've got water behind those things and I don't have to go back in and paint in some more water. Trying to be careful with that horizon. Now one last thing before I let it dry is I want to paint in the island back here. So this is my soft vine charcoal, and this is still wet. The sky is still wet. So it's going to okay, it doesn't need to be perfect. Just needs to say something in the background. Now this time I'm going to take some of that gray, and the gray was a mix of burnt sienna, blue, and gesso. To that gray I'm adding some of the ultramarine blue, a little bit of alizarin crimson, and gesso to lighten it. What I'm looking for is a color that is just a little bit lighter than my sky. Kind of a soft, dusty violet. So I'm just going to test it off to the side here. I think it needs a little bit more white. White changes the value. Value is the lightness or darkness of a color. Hue or intensity is the brightness of a color. Okay, so let's try this. Now for this I'm going to use the end of my brush here, and I'm just going to pull down. I'm going to go up to that line I just made, and I'm going to pull down. That gives me a soft edge. This is in the distance, so it's not going to have any hard edges or too much detail or anything else. You want to avoid hard edges because they will draw the eye, and if they're in the background and not really important, you want to keep your viewer's eye on the thing that you spend all the time on. So by just pulling down and using the end of my brush, I can create that edge. This works on almost everything that you are doing that's in the distance, distant mountains, the idea of distant trees, distant buildings, just to create the outside edge of something and create a nice soft edge. In the middle of this, it doesn't really make any difference. Now I'll get to that in just a second. This is also still wet, like I said before, so some of that blue is going to mix in a little bit with this soft gray that I've done. And here, right along that edge, I'm just going to kind of soften between the water and the island here. So I'm just pulling down. Think about what you're painting. This is basically a mountain sticking up in the middle of the ocean. So rather than painting it straight across or straight up and down like you would a wall, think about the angles. Your eye will pick up on those brush strokes. And you want to make sure that those brush strokes match what you're painting. A little bit more of that. Okay, I'm going to let this dry, and when we come back, I'll show you what else I'm going to do. So, give me a minute.